How you doing? My name's Jesse. Vlog entry number 4, October 10th. What have I been working on? Well, as you can tell from the video clip, I've been working on the blues. I did a little better job this week with improvising over some blues licks. And it's funny, I made it a little more complicated. The spirit took me to something beyond just 1-4-5. And it didn't take me quite as long to put something together. I didn't stress out over take after take after take. So I guess it's just time on the fingerboard, right? And I know that, and yet I'm still surprised when I find out that it pays off to practice. Who knew? I'm playing with these guys, and it's funny. It's been a rough couple months for me. I started a new job, and something old dog, something new tricks. And I started playing with this band just a little bit before that. And between the work and the band and all my other responsibilities, I started getting really stressed out. And I said, something's got to go. So one day I told the guys, I said, look, I'm going to have to quit. I'm sorry. Like, I'll play the last gig that we've got on the books, but I'm going to have to go because this is just too much for me. And they were so cool. They were like, yeah, we understand. We're really sorry to see you go. And the one guy was like, well, could you stay till Christmas? Stay till Christmas, and if things are still tough, And I went, and it occurred to me, why am I playing music? It's certainly not to make a name for myself. I don't have that kind of talent, right? I love to play, and what better way to make friends than over music? And I realized this was a group of guys that were just really cool. No egos, lots of talent, super smart, cool ideas. It's just a pleasure working with them. They all have interesting stories, interesting lives. And I went, yeah, I'll stay till Christmas. And then after practice was over, we were packing up, and the other guitar player was like, oh, so you gonna dump us at Christmas? Is that how it is? Are we gonna be the Christmas dump? So I'm probably gonna stay longer, I'm guessing. Anyway, that's what I've been working on now. What have I been working on it with? I have a Yamaha RGX A2. This was a COVID purchase. Back in 2007, I happened to be at a music store in Montgomery, Alabama. And I was just killing time, and I was trying out different guitars. And this was one of the guitars that I tried out. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really interesting. I didn't know what to make of it. It had the little spindle tuners, fine tuners on it. And it was cool. It had an interesting sound, but I didn't know how to classify it. And so, and I keep an eye out for things like that. But two things. One, these don't show up too often in the wild, even though they made them over 10 years, from 2005 to 2015. You don't see too many of them for sale. And when you do, they're usually at least $400. And I'm not saying a Yamaha isn't worth $400, but for a guitar that I'm not sure is going to be the one, I don't want to spend that kind of money. I grew up not being able to afford expensive guitars, and so dropping more than $500 on a guitar makes me a little nervous. So this one happened to come up, and it needed work, so it was about $187. And on top of it, I basically got it for free because it turns out I had points. I had earned points on my Visa card, and they said, do you want to use these points towards your purchase? And I went, yes, I do. So I ended up having to buy a new wiring harness for it, which is part of the reason why you'll see that like in the neck position, the green light's supposed to be on. When both pickups are on, both the green and the blue are supposed to be on. In the bridge position, the blue is supposed to be on. And I'm not sure why it's not. I've tried rewiring it, and I haven't had any luck. I'm probably going to keep on just because I'm OCD enough that that's going to bug me. I had to get a couple other things for it, but it's functional, and it's not a bad player. It's got a really interesting sound to it. So interesting, in fact, that I kind of had trouble bonding with it because I didn't know what kind of sound it was. It has a lot of sparkly top end to it, you know. But it's not a Strat. It's not a Les Paul. It's not even really a Super Strat. It's got a C-shaped neck to it. It's not super wide and flat. I don't really like the lack of position markers on it, but I can live with it, I guess. It's got side dot markers, but at my age, detail gets lost. I haven't played out with it, but I've played with it some. And like I said, I was having trouble bonding with it. I know about the technology, the sound tubes, and it's supposed to be more resonant, blah, 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 blah. It sounds like horseshit to me. I think basically it's got the same kind of technology that a holocore door has, which is not bad, just not revolutionary. I think the guitar's shortcomings came from not the construction design, but the fact that they were trying to really kind of play off that iPod concept. Remember, this came out in 2005, and Apple and the iPod were absolutely ruling in terms of the market. And so I think they were trying to, if they could have said iGuitar on it, they would have. But I don't know if that aesthetic translates well 20 years later. I think maybe if they had made some of these, you know, with like a photo flame finish on it, then I think maybe it might have had a little more staying power because it's super light. It's 6 pounds. And what more does a Gen Xer love than saving his back playing some gig at a VFW somewhere? So I think about this guitar, and I think about the difficulty I had classifying it. And it's funny, I'm an English teacher by trade, and this week we were reading a story called She Unnames Them, which was a story that made allusions to the story of Adam and Eve and the verses in Genesis that talked about how Adam named all the God's creatures. Well, in this fictional story, Eve decides to unname them all because she sees the names as being limiting. And conceptually it makes sense, right? There are certain connotations that come with words like dog, or shrimp, or jackal, or pig, that may be warranted and might not be warranted, but they come with the name. And because they come with the name, it can create barriers, distance between us. And I like the concept. It definitely talks about the power of language. But I think sometimes we need those classifications because otherwise we just kind of look at something and go, what am I supposed to use this for? So I contemplated this, and I think I'm starting to bond more with it now because it occurred to me what I think this guitar really is at its core, no pun intended, is the engineers at Yamaha sat down and said, how could, if we had been given the job of redesigning, say, a Dane Electro U2 for the modern era, what would it look like? And when you think about it like that, it makes perfect sense, right? Super lightweight, just like a Dane Electro in comparison to, say, like a Les Paul. All that beautiful top end sparkle. And yet they improved on it. One of the issues with the Dane Electro is the frame doesn't really, it's not as ergonomic. I mean, it's still lightweight and it's not unplayable, but you can put a contour at the top. What if you could put a contour on the top of a Dane Electro? What if you could make a Dane Electro in a double cutaway with complete access to all 22 frets? What if you made it easier to adjust the truss rod? What if you had a truss rod? Now, I know that's sacrilege to Dane Electro owners, because especially the guys from the guys who own the 50s era Dane Electros will point to those two steel rods and say, you don't need truss rods. And you probably don't. I've been fortunate enough to have owned two 50s era Danos. But I never really bonded with Dane Electros. And I felt bad about it. But because I know they're so popular. And to me, the Dane Electro was sort of like the Lance Armstrong of the electric guitar. It was super popular. Everyone loved it. It was a performer. It was flashy. But there was something that just made it short of the total package. And I think this guitar makes up for it. There's real bass. That's lacking in a Dane Electro, and yet you still have all that beautiful top end. So I think classification, while it can be limiting, sometimes is imperative to help with your imagination. I have a clearer vision of how I would use this guitar. This guitar was going to be up on the chopping block, but now I think I'm going to hang on to it. So those are my thoughts for this week. Hope you found it entertaining. I'll see you next week. My name's Jesse.